A Chainsaw Man ranking was never in the cards for me, not in a million years. I was planning on doing something like JJK or OG Dragon Ball next, but that damn ending, man. The manga's serialized, so there's some time between chapters, and I figured I must have forgotten or missed something along the way. There had to be something to make me feel better about where it left off. Anyway, I reread Chainsaw Man. I'm still mixed on the ending, but I also took notes along the way and have put together a list of every character from part 1, ranked by their effective combat strength. I'm only drawing on what happened within part 1, and I'm taking each character at their most consistent level of power. Chainsaw Man's scaling is a little more complex than Dragon Ball's. There's more interplay between abilities and matchups matter a lot. So if you see a character above someone they lost to, or vice versa, it's because I found them to be more consistently at a higher level than their win-loss record might suggest. I'm also only counting devils who actually participated in a fight, not ones used through a contract, so things like the Fox and Octopus Devils are excluded. I don't know if this will be more controversial than some of my other takes, but I'm sure you won't like everything I have to say. At the end of the day, this is all for fun, so let me know in the comments if you do anything differently. One last thing, tiers run from S down to F. Characters below F tier don't get mentioned, and there will obviously be spoilers for the manga if you're anime only. If that's you, bookmark this and come back in 2 to 3 years when they finish adapting part 1. Now on to the rankings. Characters in F tier are here for one of two reasons. Either they don't have many combat showings, or the fights that they do have aren't that impressive. Being in F tier isn't a knock. There are plenty of characters who don't even make the list. The Zombie Devil falls into that second category, sitting at 36th place. His zombies just aren't that strong. Any E tier tears through them, the way Madara tore through the Shinobi Alliance. His own durability and stats aren't much better, getting handled by early series Denji and later by Power without much trouble. He has some utility for getting an army up quickly, and maybe he becomes dangerous with proper support. We saw what he could do when Makima was pulling the strings. But on his own, with a handful of undead, he just isn't that much of a threat. Speaking of being weak on its own, only 3% of you watching this video are subscribed. If you want to see future rankings for series like JJK and OG Dragon Ball, consider hitting that subscribe button. 35th place is Nomo. He survived a blast from Reze when everyone around him didn't, and he has a contract with the Fox Devil that lets him use its paw. Now, I said he survived it, but given his state, he was very much on his last legs. We don't see much beyond that, but his toughness and contracted devil put him a step above the average devil hunter, to the extent that he edges out the zombie devil. The Division 2 Vice Captain is 34th place. He is Nomo's direct superior. He has a cool looking sword and access to the Fox Devil's head, which seems to be more potent than the paw that Nomo is stuck with. 33rd might be a surprise, but Akane is the first example of a recurring tactic in Chainsaw Man, the sneak kill. Aki's takedown of the Leech Devil, Angel's kill on Reze, and Akane's kill on the Ghost Devil all work because the target never saw them coming. Against an opponent who knows she's there, she doesn't hold up well. Kobeni evaded all of her attacks without breaking a sweat, and when she closed the distance, Akane kinda had nothing going for her. The Snake Devil does give her access to other devils' powers. She had the Ghost Devil under her control at some point, and possibly the Zombie Devil, but that isn't really part of her base kit. With Prep or the full Ghost Devil at her disposal, she'd sit significantly higher, but we're ranking what she consistently brings to the table, and it's just not that much. 2nd through 30th belongs to Quanxi's Harem, with the exception of Cosmo, who lands higher. Long outranks Pinksty and Sugihagi because she actually has combat feats. She restrained Denji and can breathe fire, and she took multiple pistol shots without too much discomfort. Pinksty and Sugihagi have no individual combat feats to speak of. The main justification for placing these three above the bottom tier is context. Kishibe's contracted devils are considered formidable, and all 4 harem members engaged him without hesitation. They lost, but Kishibe is an outlier among devil hunters. Against a more standard human opponent with the same contracts, any one of them, especially Long, likely holds the advantage. E-tier characters are genuinely dangerous. Some could challenge and maybe even beat D tiers under the right circumstances. The main distinction is that E tiers are either too fragile or lack the consistent stopping power to belong with the characters above them. The Leech Devil lands at 29th based on her underwhelming performance against a near-dead early Denji. She won the fight, but his chainsaw nub was chipping away at her, and his base physicals were enough to block her strikes and knock her around. It's hard to gauge exactly how much stronger Denji was in his weakened hybrid form versus his baseline, but the gap couldn't have been enormous. Every character ranked above her has more impressive showings or hype surrounding them, making the bottom of E tier the most natural ranking for her. Kobeni is 28th without ever revealing her contracted devil. Her raw speed lets her navigate through Akane's snake without effort and handle both the untransformed Katana Man and Akane simultaneously. She also accidentally drove her knife through Aki's suit in the Eternity Devil arc, the same suit that later partially absorbed Katana Man's quick draw. All of this suggests that Kobeni is an absolute monster when she actually commits to a fight. The problem is that she rarely does. Her reluctance to use her devil and her general attitude towards combat stop her from placing any higher. When she does lock in, she beats the Leech Devil more often than not. The Bat Devil edges above Kobeni and the Leech Devil by virtue of actually training with a healthy early hybrid Denji for a stretch of time. He was clearly outmatched in the physical department. Denji landed clean damage consistently, but that mouth cannon is a genuine threat to anyone without high durability or regen. Even early Denji had to pull his cord again after eating one of those blasts. That said, an early Denji who wasn't at his best ended this fight relatively quickly, which caps the Bat Devil at 27th place. The Eternity Devil is 26th, which might be a little shocking given that his pocket dimension is basically an automatic win in the right scenario. The catch is that it requires opponents to enter the space he's claimed. Against most Devil Hunters and Fiends, that's probably an insta-win, but in a neutral matchup, you'd essentially have to drop someone directly into his trap for it to become a deciding factor. It would be like starting a fight against a Jujutsu Kaisen character with their domain already open, or granting an adaptation merchant their relevant adaptations before the fight starts. That's not really a fair starting point for what should be an even matchup, and reads like those Goku meme posts where he's matched up against someone like Naruto or Ichigo, but he has no legs, arms, eyes, has the cold, and hasn't eaten in 3 days. Aside from his dimension, his physicals are actually pretty good. He fought early Denji for 3 straight days, snapped his neck and caused serious harm throughout the fight. He could have actually won the fight if Himeno hadn't pulled Denji's cord. His solid physicals and the gun Devil Flesh Amp lead me to believe that he could beat the Bat and Leech Devils without needing to trap them in his dimension beforehand. Beam's case is one of solid durability without much in the way of offensive output. His Fiend form got knocked out by a kick from Tolka, someone who didn't even warrant a mention on this list, and when he tried to take a bite out of the Violence Fiend, he got swatted aside easily. His Shark Devil form adds mobility and durability, but it kinda just doesn't do much. Sure, getting bitten would suck, but it's not any more deadly than what anyone else in Chainsaw Man can do. What saves him is his survival record. He came through the entire Typhoon Devil and Reze ordeal without getting horribly disfigured or mutilated when Denji was getting torn apart by the same explosions. This puts his toughness on another level relative to the others in E tier, but the time limit on his strongest form, plus the lack of any real battle strategy or skill, holds him back from being any higher than 25th place. The Spider Devil is just above Beam at 24th place. Starting with the nature of their existence, Beam is a fiend, a devil inhabiting a human corpse, which comes with an inherent nerf to all powers and physical abilities. Quanxi is a full devil, meaning that she doesn't suffer from the same nerf that Beam does. Then there's the fear factor. The fear of sharks isn't as widespread as arachnophobia, which is a universal, borderline primal phobia that ranks significantly higher than fear of sharks in research studies. In Chainsaw Man's power system, that translates to a pretty meaningful passive boost for Quanxi. Her toolkit is also similar to Beam's. She can phase through surfaces and move through walls, but she's coming at you with 8 blades instead of 1 big head. Has no time limit on her full power the way Beam does, and appears to be more level-headed and intelligent than Beam. This leads me to believe that despite her not having many combat showings in the series, she should at the very least be above Beam in any ranking. The Groomer herself lands at 23rd place. She knocked Kobeni out with a single elbow to the gut, and given what we've established about Kobeni's physical caliber, that's not nothing. Add that to her being Kishibe's student and Aki's direct superior up until her death, and she clearly operates above the average Devil Hunter. Her edge comes from the Ghost Devil contract. That arm is invisible, intangible to attacks from anyone who isn't a devil or using a special weapon, and strong enough to casually start choking power out. It also carves chunks directly out of the Eternity Devil. Kinda functions like a shitty Kamui if you think about it, deleting pieces of an opponent with an attack that they can't normally defend against. She's still just a human and goes down to any sufficiently strong hit, but her damage potential is immediate enough to threaten characters well above her tier in the right conditions. Power sits at 22nd, just above Himeno. I'm not going to factor in her post-resurrection Blood Devil form. That version shows up for maybe 1% of part 1. I will address where I'd put her once we get there though. Her physicals are genuinely impressive. She outpaced human Denji early in the series, knocked him out, and later blitzed an untransformed Katana Man from close range the same way Kobeni did. This was all before her training arc with Kishibe and Denji, where she actually developed real tactics and fight awareness. That training paid off. She and Denji tag teamed Kishibe to the point of landing a scratch on him, which is more than almost anyone in this tier could be capable of. Given the gouges in the floor and the tears in Denji's pants, Power was likely fighting alongside transformed Denji and kept up with him well enough to also earn a perfect score from Kishibe. She also reacted to an attack from the Gun Fiend in roughly the same time frame as Denji. Himeno did nearly choke her out, but that was early in the series and a surprise attack. Power's grown stats, sharpened intelligence, and combat experience put her firmly ahead. Angel is in a similar situation to Kobeni, pretty crazy abilities and potential, but a lack of willingness to use them. Makima puts him second, only to Kishibe across all of Division 4, conditional on him actually trying. His weapons carry absurd damage potential. The spear Makima forged from his ability was enough to finish off a weakened Pochita, and his lesser weapons let Aki engage the Ghost Devil. They one-shot an untransformed Reze, who was still well above human level, and could hypothetically threaten Makima somewhat with his 100-year sword. His lifespan drain on contact takes months and seconds, his wings can block gunfire, and when he actually engaged, he cleared out a wave of Santa's dolls that were causing real problems for the group protecting Denji. That specific sword he used also has some odd ability that we don't get any elaboration on. It seemingly didn't leave any wound on the dolls that he hit, but still killed them all in one hit. While impressive, what keeps him at 21st is his floor. He got blown off his feet by the Typhoon Devil, would have died without Aki catching him, and got knocked out by Quanxi alongside Aki despite both of them blocking his strike. Angel's passivity and lack of raw physicality cap him, but under the right circumstances he could take down characters ranked well above him. Near the top of E tier, Aki is the 20th strongest character in Chainsaw Man. Specifically, this is the version of him equipped with Angel's Sword and the Future Devil in his eye. Not the Fox and Curse Devil setup, and not the Gun Fiend, which is just a diminished version of the Gun Devil. Aki has a strong reputation. The general public considers him one of the strongest devil hunters around, and multiple other divisions actively wanted him for their squads. He appears to run a boxing gauntlet through the 2nd division without taking damage, and fights a blood-amped power in a fistfight off-screen, the same power who casually launched Denji into the ceiling immediately beforehand. In serious encounters, his track record is equally solid. He landed multiple hits on Katana Man before contracting the Future Devil, reacted to Quanxi's opening blitz, held his own against Reze in close quarters until she switched to AoE attacks, and compared to Katana Man, he outlasted him against the Ghost Devil by a decent margin. When it was just him and the Violence Fiend against Reze, she actually hesitated, and while she was anemic and weakened to an unknown degree at that point, making her pause at all says something to his threat potential. His limitation is purely physical. A single mistake against Reze would have been fatal for him. Quanxi knocked him out despite him blocking her attack. His body couldn't keep pace with what his Future Devil eye was showing him, and the Ghost Devil eventually overwhelmed him because of it. Against the Typhoon Devil, he was helpless in the wind, while Reze, Beam, and Denji moved through the storm without too much issue. Aki's reaction speed and lethality with Angel's Blade set him apart from the rest of E tier, but the body he's working with can't sustain that advantage against anyone above him, which is what keeps him from crossing into D. 19th place, and the only character aside from Aki that could qualify for E+, is Cosmo, and this is entirely built around her Halloween mind hacks. If it connects, you're done. There might be a trigger condition, like the target saying Halloween, but it's never actually confirmed. What is confirmed is that a successful hit is basically an insta-win on anyone it reaches. The only limiting factor is that her physical stats are probably around Beam's Fiend form at best, which means that she doesn't survive long against the real monsters in D tier and above, as shown by Kishibe easily taking her out. The window to land her attack just might not be there. Against E tier and below though, she gets it off before she goes down, and she has some decent odds against some of the people ranked above her as well. D tiers represent what I would consider the typical peak that someone could achieve through typical contracts, weird biology, or hybridization. In most scenarios, they are going to be one of, if not the strongest characters around, and treated as a serious threat or prized by others. Despite D tier being D tier, these characters are not weak by any means. The Typhoon Devil is a soft D- and the 18th strongest character in Part 1. Beam and Chainsaw Man dealt with it in a matter of pages, so the actual fight wasn't much. But the sheer scale of the storm it generates is enough to send formidable characters flying, and the Violence Fiend chose to avoid the fight entirely, the same way he avoided Reze. Its physical stats are nothing to sneeze at. It was able to just bowl through buildings by walking. Think of the Typhoon Devil as the physical benchmark for entering this tier. If you can survive its storm and put it down, you belong here, but if the wind takes you off your feet and you can't close the distance, you stay in E tier. 17th through 14th go to the Whip, Longsword, Flamethrower, and Spear hybrids, only seen in Makima's confrontation with Pochita. All four are largely without feats. Pochita dismantled them in close quarters without visible effort. Their order doesn't matter much, with one exception. The Spear hybrid actually wounded Pochita with a thrown lance, earning the top slot among the four. That comes with the significant caveat that it was a sneak attack, and a direct exchange would have likely ended the same way as it did for the others. Weapon hybrids across Part 1 operate at a reasonably consistent level, so all four earn their positions in D tier and above the Typhoon Devil based on their hybrid status and the implied relativity with the other hybrids we see in the series. Their lack of proper feats holds them back from being placed any higher though. 13th is Katana Man. He's more or less on par with post-training Denji, though probably a notch below given that he actually lost the fight. His quick draw ability is the real story here. It effectively one-shot Aki when Aki was previously giving him trouble, and was still giving some trouble to post-training Denji, despite Denji at this point having daily fights with Kishibe. This fight also proved that the quick draw wasn't invincible, however, as Denji did block or counter the attack multiple times in their fight. Problem is that he lost to a Denji who was only entering the mid-game of part 1, and Katana Man doesn't have the chance to show any growth in his fight against Pochita, meaning that 13th is where he caps at. The Ghost Devil is directly above Katana Man at 12th place. The scaling here is fairly transparent. After fully manifesting, she dismantled Katana Man almost immediately. Everything she did under Himeno's partial contract, she's capable of at full strength, which means gouging out sections of an opponent with attacks that are invisible and intangible to anything short of a devil or specialized weapon. That intangibility extends to her own body as well, rendering conventional attacks useless. Her speed was enough to overwhelm Aki's future sight and would have killed him had he not managed to rein in his fear. For reference, Reze opted for an area of effect attack rather than simply overwhelming Aki through direct combat. The Ghost Devil isn't outright attacking faster than Reze, but it's a useful comparison for how suffocating she is in a fight. Her key weakness is that she sees the world through fear. Characters who genuinely don't fear her, or can't suppress it, represent a real matchup problem, especially if they do have the means of killing her, like Aki did. The Unrestricted Violence Fiend is the 11th strongest character in part 1. Yes, I'm treating his unmasked form as the relevant baseline, while leaving out Power's Blood Devil Resurrection. I acknowledge I'm being a little inconsistent, but I'm just going to move on now. With his gas mask, Gali operates closer to mid-E tier. Without it, the jump is pretty dramatic. We don't get to see the full scope of it because his only unmasked opponent is the Darkness Devil, but the contextual evidence is strong. Kishibe explicitly advises against ever removing the mask under any circumstances. Earlier in the series, he tells Power and Denji that any devil capable of taking him down is categorically dangerous. I don't think Kishibe believes he'd necessarily lose to Gali, but him showing any caution towards a devil at all says a lot. That, along with his impressive endurance against the Darkness Devil, being the only one, aside from Makima, to keep fighting after the first round of a focused attack, gives the impression of a character on level with some of the stronger devils and hybrids, despite only being a fiend. He's still largely a statement merchant, which keeps him from going any higher, but Kishibe's warning is convincing enough to lock him in here. Dennis himself is 10th place in the ranking. Denji grows a lot across part 1, both in raw power and as a fighter. He took down Katana Man after training with Kishibe, no-diffed the Typhoon Devil alongside Beam, and flipped a fight against Reze he was losing badly by using his chains to restrain her, forcing a draw. Like all hybrids, his regeneration is extraordinary, but what separates Denji from others with the same passive advantage is his willingness to weaponize it. He'll do things no rational opponent would anticipate, like mounting Beam, drowning himself and Reze simultaneously, channeling his inner Agni to beat a Darkness Amped Santa Claus who was far above his weight class, and the final gambit against Makima that actually worked. Whether he's a genius is debatable, but his improvised plans succeed at a pretty alarming rate. He's more dependent on external factors and lateral thinking than on outright stat advantages, especially when an opponent has him beaten on paper. Still, that approach has proven effective enough to justify 10th and his status as the 3rd strongest hybrid. In quick aside, Denji does briefly access Power's blood near the end of part 1, but he loses that when he makes that Pochita clone. That's clearly not something he could do under normal circumstances, but if you want to count that specific version of him, he'd rank much higher given how the clone performed against the hybrids and Makima. I went back and forth on whether to place Kishibe above or below Denji, but settled on above, purely on the basis of him off-screening transformed Denji and Power while only taking a scratch. Denji has grown since that session, enough that a rematch would be competitive, but Kishibe wins that fight more often than not. As of the Reze arc, Makima considers him the strongest devil hunter in Division 4. He kept pace with Quanxi briefly in their exchange before she put him through a window. His contracted devils, Knife, Needle, and Claw, aren't shown doing anything, but given the respect that Quanxi's harem gives them, it seems like he's working with some strong devils. Most importantly for Kishibe scaling is Denji's choice to flee after watching how Quanxi handled Kishibe and the rest of the squad. As far as I can remember, this might be the only time that Denji has ran away from a fight. I read this as him using Kishibe as a type of benchmark for the type of opponent he can handle, and him getting low diffed was enough to scare Denji away when he previously took multiple shots at someone like Reze, who beat him in every encounter they had. His only real limitation is the fact that he's human and doesn't have any hybrid or fiend biology that grants him high survivability or regeneration. 9th place. Yoshida's above Kishibe at 8th based on his performance against Quanxi being demonstratively superior. Yoshida reacted to her attacks and actually landed a counter, which is more than anyone else managed. His Octopus Devil lets him set up smoke screens and move fast enough to get behind Quanxi for all the good that did him. We later get a panel where Kishibe explicitly praises Yoshida's abilities as surpassing his own. Yoshida attributes it to age, but that doesn't change the fact that the statement was made. Maybe Kishibe's prime is superior, but at this point in the story, Yoshida is the sharper combatant. Like Kishibe, he's also limited by a lack of regen and survivability, meaning that he needs to fight way more carefully compared to a Fiend or a hybrid. At the top of D tier, earning a D+, and the 7th spot is Reze. She borderline stomped Denji in every engagement they had. It wasn't even close. She blew off most of his body with a torpedo kick and could detach his arms with sparks faster than he could react. She carved through all of Division 2, showing extraordinary combat intelligence by ripping off her own head and regenerating a clean body to escape the mold infesting it. And she could also beat Bakugo in a fight. I'm joking. I mean, depending on when this comes out, Death Battle might have already given their conclusion to the fight. They've never had a controversial outcome in the past, so I'm sure they gave Bakugo the win there. Reze operates at a level of speed and destructive output that nobody else in this tier can challenge. Denji being largely helpless against her is enough proof. She's a child soldier who has trained her entire life to fight against devils and other hybrids, the second strongest hybrid in Part 1 by a clear margin. The reason she lands at D+ rather than C is that the gap between her and the characters above her is too significant when it comes to overall scaling, even if I think she has a really good matchup into one of the characters in C tier. She belongs above D tier, but doesn't have solid footing to stand in C tier. C tiers are just D tiers with a higher degree of bullshit working in their favor, such that they are basically unbeatable by anyone below them, unless the matchup really favors them. These two are interchangeable depending on how you define Santa Claus dying for the purposes of a fight. If eliminating her requires taking out the entire hive mind, she gets first among the two. If only the active body needs to fall, Quanxi takes it. Either way, they share C tier at 6th and 5th respectively. Quanxi needs little explanation. Her human form alone is too much for the strongest devil hunters and hybrids. She knocked out Aki and Angel simultaneously through a block, and watching her handle Kishibe was enough for Denji to decide a fight wasn't worth having. As the bow hybrid, she blitzed Denji with her normal movement and tears Santa Claus apart with her arrows before she can react. Santa Claus has a hacks profile that should probably get more traction in cross-verse discussions. Her hive mind spans the globe, a network of dolls that any human can be folded into through a single touch. Post-Darkness Devil contract, even fiends can fall under this control. Those dolls can wound Quanxi and Denji with their blades and have the potential to spiral out of control in any populated area. In direct combat away from darkness, Santa Claus had the clear physical edge over Denji, punching him through buildings on her own and overwhelming him through sheer numbers with her doll army. In total darkness, she regenerates freely and her power jumps to another level entirely, going from getting dismantled from Quanxi's arrows to catching them out of the air mid-flight and easily blitzing Denji, who was previously keeping up with her. Put Santa in complete darkness and she'd sit at the top of C tier, uncontested. In neutral conditions, though, Quanxi has the advantage through sheer speed and lethality. One wrinkle, since every doll in the network has to be eliminated to truly kill her, she can keep coming back unless someone takes the kind of drastic action we saw, where she was driven into a catatonic state with infinite knowledge. These two represent an insurmountable wall for everyone below them, but not the ceiling of the verse. Side note, I'd put Power's amped Blood Devil form below both of them, but above Reze, given her blood hacks and the fact that she managed to successfully escape from Makima with Pochita. Blood-boosted Denji also lands in this tier, based on the Pochita clone's performance against the hybrids and Makima. B tiers and above present threats to human existence, with the only difference being that a B tier can be stopped by an A tier, and an A tier could probably be stopped by an S tier if they actually bothered showing up. The only B tier entry, and the 4th strongest character in Part 1, is the Gun Devil. He's simply a walking weapon of mass destruction. At 20% of his full form, he killed tens of thousands of people and crossed the length of Japan in seconds. His toolkit doesn't have a lot of variety. Shoot through every heart and head within a 1 to 1.5 kilometer radius, and not much else. But it is extraordinarily effective. He killed Makima multiple times in their fight that lasted a handful of seconds before getting destroyed by her. Even his passive movement is destructive. Cities and forests shred in his wake, and a crater forms beneath wherever he stands. Fighting him would be like fighting someone with wall hacks and aimbot on Counter-Strike, but their op is also full auto and doesn't need to reload. He's also one of the few characters that could reasonably take Santa's hive mind out, given his raw movement speed and ability to kill everyone within a kilometer of him. Comfortably above everyone below him, but not in the same conversation as the top 3. Makima and Pochita are our only A tiers for the ranking. I'll cover them together since their reasoning is pretty intertwined, and honestly, I think they're interchangeable in my view, ranking-wise. In a vacuum, Pochita is the stronger of the two. Makima herself considers a direct fight against him unwinnable. In practice, Makima wins through superior knowledge of the power system and a willingness to exploit every rule until Pochita is weakened enough to take down. Pochita blitzed hybrids and tears them apart with no difficulty. He handles Makima and the feetless Hell Devil the same way. On the Hell Devil, we have almost nothing to go on, but the BFR ability alone probably makes him high D tier, since a single successful warp could take out C and B tier opponents before they can respond, provided he isn't killed first. Pochita also seems to have this weird trait of not truly dying like other devils, who reincarnate as similar but different entities after their death. Think of the Control Devil becoming Nayuta after Makima's death, or Power saying that the new Blood Devil won't remember Denji and would have to be befriended again. Whether it comes down to his core nature and relationship with the devils or just a quirk, Pochita might just be able to continuously resurrect without losing who he was before. Although, given the ending of Chainsaw Man, I'm not even sure if this guy's the Chainsaw Devil, I'll be honest. Makima's physicals are pretty decent. She can outbox weaken Pochita, who was still tearing apart the hybrids. What really sets her apart is her having the widest displayed hacks profile in Part 1, telekinesis capable of launching Pochita into orbit and drawing blood from him, a contract that redirects any attack that she takes to a random Japanese citizen, a roster of controlled assets that include the Angel Devil, Zombie Devil, Reze, Quanxi, the other weapon hybrids, and any contracted devil that her subordinates might have, like Aki's Future Devil. The breadth of what she can bring to bear is staggering. It was only Pochita's overwhelming stat advantage that kept her from winning early on into the fight. That's not to mention Makima's insta-win button of being able to control anyone she views as lesser than herself, which just so happens to be 99% of the verse. Luckily for Pochita, he's one of the few characters that Makima respects and actually admires. The Darkness Devil is the only S tier. He exists on a different plane than the rest of the Part 1 cast, and honestly, only 2 characters in Part 2 get close to his level. Makima's telekinesis can touch him, but when the exchange continued, he overwhelmed her comprehensively enough that she chose to disengage rather than fight on. Even before then, Makima preferred to avoid a face-to-face confrontation with the Darkness Devil, being one of the few times she was actually frustrated by a situation in the entire series. He can heal in darkness the way Santa Claus does, but he generates his own, which means you essentially have to one-shot him to win, similar to the problem that Maharaga poses. He treated the entire public safety squad and Quanxi as minor inconveniences, taking them apart without visible effort, and stepped up only marginally when Makima entered the picture. This is a pretty big contrast to Makima using everything at her disposal to take down Pochita, and Pochita's own mindset going into the fight to be to protect Denji and himself. There's no room for either of those two to be fighting below their best, while the Darkness Devil approached his fight without much effort. I've seen some debate on if Pochita could take him down, but I think the Darkness Devil's status as a transcendent being among devils, who's never died despite existing since the birth of humanity, is a strong implication that Pochita doesn't quite stack up to the primal fears, even without taking Part 2 into account. I do think Pochita poses a threat to the Darkness Devil, but it's the same way a honey badger would pose a threat to a person. It might hurt you a lot, but you're probably, definitely, going to beat that honey badger in a fight. And that's the ranking. I haven't made the actual tier list picture yet, but it's up now. I'm going to assume that it's really cluttered and hard to see. If you're still here, consider subscribing. That would be really cool, especially if you haven't done that already. Like, what are you doing? You know, you watched this 27 minute long video. I mean, unless you skip to the end, but you watched this video, you should subscribe. I have Part 2 like noted down. I have a ranking partially made. I'm not sure if I'll make that video. It depends on how well this one does. I don't know. I thought it would be neat to do that while I reread Chainsaw Man. And then I felt like making a whole series ranking would not be too complicated, but I feel like that would be really bloated, you know, like this was a 36 character ranking, and I feel like with part 2 included, like this video would be an hour long. But yeah, like and subscribe, please, and that's the video.